begin when you're ready. Please leave your witness forms on the front desk if you are leaving, and we will make sure that those get dispersed among the committee members. Senator, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senator Adam Schnelting, representing the 23rd Senatorial District. That's Eastern St. Charles County, for those who may be unaware. Today I want to present to you Senate Bill 76. It is an update to the Missouri Human Rights Act. The intent is to clarify what is meant by sex when the statute was originally written and passed. In RMA versus Blue Springs School District, the courts recently sided with a transgender student who sued the school district over their single-sex bathroom policy, awarding the student about $4.7 million. The state Supreme Court issued an opinion in which they essentially redefined sex to include gender identity, which strayed obviously from the more traditional interpretation of sex. When the courts set that precedent, it made it challenging for some of our school districts to set single-sex bathroom policies. Public schools, like one of my own in my own district, have sought to pass policies that ensure stricter guidelines for their non-single stall restrooms in an effort to protect kids from those who would use the loophole as a backdoor to prey on kids. But with the court's precedent that has been set, our districts are fighting a losing battle. They're facing potential fines and lawsuits. What this bill does, what it aims to do, is update and clarify that the original intent, that is, that the term sex that was placed in statute in the Human Rights Statute relates to biological sex and does not include gender identity or sexual orientation. And I think that this will solve part of the problem that we're having with districts who are concerned about passing single-sex bathroom policies. And this would leave it up to the school districts, so there's no confusion. Each of the districts would be able to pass their own policies one way or another. This would just bring reduce the ambiguity in our state law and bring some clarity and a stable legal definition of sex in the Missouri Human Rights Act. With that, Madam Chair, I'll open it up. I want to be very brief. I have a hard deadline at noon to be at another meeting, and so I want to make sure that everybody who's here to testify for or against can get that opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions for the senator? Seeing none, we'll move forward with our first witness in favor, keeping those comments to 2 minutes or less, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Steve Ellman, and personally, I'd like to testify or express my support for all three of these bills today. But I'm also here to testify as the county executive of St. Charles County, and there's two other issues in this bill and in this type of legislation. I think you probably are aware of them, but if you're not, I want to give you a little history. This whole thing about bathrooms. I was not a public servant at the time, but I remember back in the early 80s, and they were in this hall, in this room, they were debating the Equal Rights Amendment. And people on the left people on the right were claiming that if the Equal Rights Amendment passed, that there would, you'd have to have co-ed bathrooms. And of course, the people on the left said, "Oh no, that's ridiculous. No judge is ever going to interpret it that way." Well, fast forward to today, and that's exactly what our Supreme Court did back in 2019. And I will tell you, this is the Missouri Human Rights Act. As the senator suggested to you, this was based on a Missouri Human Rights Act that was last amended and passed in the Missouri Senate back in 1994. I was a member of the Senate at that time, and I voted for it. And I read the language. It said you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. I can guarantee you it never occurred to me that in supporting that language, I would be supporting what the Supreme Court did. And I will go out on a limb a little bit. I don't think there was any of the other 33 senators or anybody on the other side of the building that really intended that that be used in this particular way. As you know, there was 4 people on the court that disagreed with me. Zell Fisher was in the minority, and he, writing for the minority, said It is not this court's role to question the wisdom, social desirability, or economic policy underlying a statute, as these are matters for the legislative's determination.
You've reached your 2-minute time
Pardon me?
limit. You've reached your two-minute time limit. Can you wrap up your comments, please?
Okay. The other issue here that is you need to realize is that several years ago up here, you went ahead and allowed attorney's fees on this Missouri Human Rights Act. So what you have now is in this particular case, not only did the jury award damages, but they awarded a very high number on attorney's fees. What that means is when St. Charles County gets sued on the Missouri Human Rights Act, our insurance carrier is settling the case not on the basis of the merits, but on the basis of the fact that if $1 is awarded by a jury, then the winning side, then the plaintiff gets all their attorney's fees, which is a real problem fiscally for our county and all the political subdivisions in the state. And I would love to see that issue addressed as well. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, in favor?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Arnie C. Acedino, State Public Advocate. I submitted my online form in support of all three bills. I strongly believe that the term sex shall mean your birth sex at the time that you were brought into this world and at the time that your birth certificate was documented at the hospital. The term shall apply to all aspects, including public restrooms, public accommodations, and I feel that it needs to be a term put into our state statute. Therefore, I support SB 76. It just makes sense. It makes sense morally, and it makes ethical sense. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Did you fill your witness form out online also?
Yes, ma'am, I
Okay,
did.
Thank you.
Did you
All right.
receive it? Yes, sir. Okay, cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Next, in favor?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Randy Cook. I'm a resident of Senate District 23. I'm also the Vice President of the Francis Howell School District Board of Education in St. Charles County. Although I want to be very clear that my comments here today are mine and mine alone, I do not speak on behalf of the district here today. The Missouri Human Rights Act, or MHRA, was first signed into law in 1957 to protect against discrimination based on race or national ancestry. In 1978, the law was amended to add sex among other protected classes. At that time, there was much less confusion about the definition of the word sex than there is here today. The past 10 years have seen a plethora of legal battles over this very definition, both in Missouri and nationwide. The Missouri case I am most familiar with that questions the definition of the term sex under the MHRA is RMA v. Blue Springs, which involves a school district denying a student access to the male restroom and school locker room, which the plaintiff alleges is discrimination on the basis of sex under the MHRA. In this case, the plaintiff's initial birth certificate has the female sex marker, but as a teenager, the plaintiff had the sex marker changed to male pursuant to 193-215.9 of the revised Missouri statutes. This alleged discrimination occurred 10 years ago, yet the parties are still arguing the case. The Missouri Supreme Court heard oral arguments in this case just this morning across the street, which is currently on its second appeal to that court over, in large part, the very definition of sex which your committee is hearing today. During that case's first visit to the Supreme Court in 2019, Judge Fisher, in his dissenting opinion, wrote, quote, "When there is no statutory definition, the plain and ordinary meaning of the statutory term can be derived from the dictionary," end quote. And he was referencing a 2014 Missouri case, Circuit City Stores v. Director of Revenue. Yet many Missouri courts are still confused about the definition. The courts are ignoring the dictionary and plain old common sense by concerning themselves with legal theory about the legislature in 1978, what they meant by so-called biological sex or legal sex. The General Assembly has an opportunity here to correct this, and I urge the body to vote for Senate Bill 76 and move it forward without delay.
Thank you for making your comments succinct and staying within the time limit. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next in favor?
Good morning, Timothy Faber. I would like to speak in favor of this bill, first of all, because our society, our culture, and I learned this myself a few years ago, there are people who think that there is a difference between sex and gender. I was raised thinking whatever your biological sex is, that's your gender. But they create two different places on medical forms and stuff for you to fill out. So if gender is something different than sex, then why would sex mean gender? You can't have it both ways. A person is either XX or XY. In addition to all of that, I am formerly a member of the Missouri Commission on Human Rights. And I can tell you that the ambiguity in the minds of some on this issue is confusing even for people serving on the commission. And we've heard that it's already confusing for people on the courts and school districts and other employers. I believe that passing this bill will create clarity. Whether you may agree with it or not agree with it, at least there's no ambiguity or confusion on what we mean. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, appreciate your time. Next in favor?
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Senators. My name is Jane Pushkar. I am also a director and treasurer of the Francis Howell School Board, and I wanted to come and share my thoughts about SB 76. Though some attorneys have told us that there is already a policy on the door restricting access, and it's called boys versus girls, unfortunately, some of the language inside the MHRA puts that into doubt. It's been a long journey for Policy 2116, which is the one that I introduced in October of 2023, and the biggest problem holding it up for a second vote is the MHRA. We started hearing reports of cross-sex bathroom usage, maybe one or two, well, recently, and it has been allegedly there's a 6'5", 275-pound male with gender dysphoria going into the girls' bathrooms. Problem is that shouldn't be a problem, but for those little girls that don't want him in there, unfortunately, they're afraid to speak up for fear of retribution, fear from administration, and bullying by their peers. Their parents are also afraid of retribution. It seems that there's been certain parents whose children have been removed from let's say, cheerleading captain, whatever, after they found out that their parents were not in favor of either supporting this bathroom policy and or other conservative values. The sad fact is that not a whole lot's being said about locker rooms. These young ladies are being treated like second-class citizens by saying that, you know what, you got to let these guys in because, they're transgender and they want to be there. There is no reason on this earth that a young male should be allowed in any female locker room for anything. And the other thing that's never talked about is this transgender bathroom usage. By not having a bathroom policy, not only are we, the problem is that males who don't even identify as transgender are allowed to go in the bathroom. This is not what society wants. This is not what society needs. And I beg you and plead with you to please pass these 3 bills that will stop some of this madness.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, make sure you fill out your witness form and leave it there on the desk, please. Next, in favor.
Hello again, Dr. Josephine Glazer, board certified in family medicine. I'm amending my testimony to include Senate Bill 76 in favor. Thank you so much for this common sense law. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Thank you. Next in favor.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries in Missouri, and wanted to be in support of the bill, particularly for the 2 lines on 158 and 159 on the last page of the bill that define sex as not including sexual orientation or gender identity. We think as employers this is actually necessary because of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that sex does include sexual orientation and gender identity. That affects employers that have more than 15 employees. By changing the Missouri Human Rights Act, you're actually changing it for those who have more than 6 and less than 15 employees. And we believe that's a very large group. We want to go on record in support of this.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? No. Thank you for your time. Next in favor?
Good morning again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Guillermo Villatrueva for the Missouri Catholic Conference, and we would like to go on the record in support of Senate Bill 76. I will keep it short. We support this bill because it would provide a definition for the term sex that is in keeping with a proper understanding of human nature. And providing clarity in this regard will also prevent any future attempts to distort the true meaning of the law. So we urge you to vote, do pass on this bill as well. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Any questions for the witness?
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time. Next in favor? Going once, going twice. That concludes testimony in favor of Senate Bill 76. Those, we will go into those here to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 76. Just come forward when you're ready, and just a reminder to keep your comments 2 minutes or less.
My name is Sarah Jane Hunt. I'm the managing partner of Kennedy Hunt PC, a civil rights attorney in St. Louis. I work with clients every day who have had their lives turned upside down because of who they are and who they love. The discrimination is not just about bathrooms, it's about people. A hardworking mom whose job was made untenable because of slurs and constant taunting. A young child in an elementary school bullied for not fitting into someone else's idea of what a girl should be. A high school freshman who was beaten so badly by her classmates for being herself that she lost part of her vision. This bill, whether intentional or not, tells people of Missouri that this kind of discrimination is okay. It goes beyond disagreeing with someone's life, their way of life, and it says it's okay to hurt them, and that is unacceptable. This bill tries to redefine sex in a way that excludes sexual orientation and gender, which would effectively strip Missourians of protection against that kind of discrimination. But the problem is the United States Supreme Court already ruled in Bostock versus Clayton County that this kind of discrimination is illegal. To quote Justice Gorsuch, it's impossible to discriminate against a person for being homosexual or transgender without discriminating against that individual based on sex. Our Missouri courts have followed this opinion. There is no ambiguity. There is no confusion. This is already the law. This is the law of our land, and this bill, if passed, will not change that. But what it will do is lead to unnecessary confusion and litigation, and it will lead to a waste of the finite amount of taxpayer dollars that we have trusted to your care. At the end of the day, this isn't just about law. It's about real people, our neighbors, our coworkers, our kids, who just want to live their lives without fear of being fired, evicted, or harassed. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Civic engagement runs deeply in my family. My grandfather, John Marvin Capp, served as elected county clerk in Stoddard County, Missouri for the better part of 2 decades. He believed in fairness, in the power of government, and in upholding democratic values. But he would be very disappointed if he were here today, and so am I. This bill is not about fairness, freedom, or what's best for Missouri. It's about making it easier to discriminate, and I refuse to believe that's who we are as a state. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness?
Just a quick question. From your thoughts in terms of how this would be a fiscal impact to possibly to the state, you obviously have been involved in many lawsuits, and what have some of those settlements been?
Well, the issue here is that even if we set aside the Blue Spring opinion that has been discussed here, sex stereotyping has always been something that was protected under the Human Rights Act. And what this bill would essentially do is if you are treated differently because you do not conform to the way someone believes a man or a woman should be, that is discrimination, and that is under sex. That has been decided over and over again. You can change this language, I've read it. It's a good effort, but it's not going to work. It does not do anything to change the opinions that have come down to say that sex is inherently a part of who you are as a person, how you express yourself, and who you love. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to still file the same lawsuits I was filing before. That is not going to stop me. I am going to take these cases all the way up to the Supreme Court, and I believe based on their own opinions, I am going to win. And then it is going to cost the state a lot of money to try to defend this. Most of the people that I have cases against, well, not most, but some are state entities. And so there's just going to be a lot of money thrown after bad. And I understand you might not agree with these opinions, but it's the law. And changing the definitions here isn't going to change anything about the way that precedent was made.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Make sure you leave your witness form on the desk there. Thank you. Next, in opposition.
Good morning. My name is Madeline Johnson, and I am lead trial counsel in RMA versus Blue Springs School District. I came from just across the street where the case was heard by the Supreme Court again this morning. I've been doing this one case for 11 years. Changing the Missouri Human Rights Act to try to define sex, the only purpose of this definition is specifically to exclude LGBTQ plus Missouri citizens from the protections of the Missouri Human Rights Act. As an attorney, I can echo everything that Ms. Hunt just testified to. I will not be stopping to bring lawsuits. In fact, tongue-in-cheek, I kind of want to say, if this body passes this, thank you, because you're going to triple my caseload. I will be bringing lawsuits, continuing to bring them under the Missouri Human Rights Act. And then when the Missouri Commission on Human Rights denies me a notice of right to sue, I'll be counseling my clients that it's time to go to federal court and sue the state of Missouri for a violation of your constitutional rights under 42 U.S.C. 1983, for violation of a person's rights under the color of state law. It's going to be very expensive for the state of Missouri, as Ms. Hunt stated. And my resolve, I'm not about to stop doing what I do. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Make sure you leave your witness form there on the desk. Next, in opposition.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Keith Rose. I'm from St. Louis, and I am also the former director of LGBTQ initiatives at the Metro St. Louis Equal Housing and Opportunity Council. EHOC, as we call it, is a state, federal, and locally funded agency that's contracted by the government to investigate complaints on discrimination in housing and places of public accommodation. And I do have to admit, up until hearing this testimony this morning, I didn't realize how much of this bill was built around school bathrooms. And that's because seeing it from my perspective as a professional, it does so much more than that. And I really think it's important for us to talk about what this bill does. But first, I do want to say that one of the big issues that we have as an agency, EHOC, is sexual harassment. And I really, really respect that there are people who are approaching this issue because they want to protect people from sexual harassment, and we all want spaces to be safe. I know that our agency's hotline receives many calls from people who are being sexually harassed or who have been sexually assaulted, and obviously we want those people to have protections. But at the same time, what this bill does is far beyond the scope of changing the rules for school bathrooms. So there are two main components. First is talking about the definition of sex, and the second is limiting sexual orientation, gender identity from the definition of sex. So first and foremost, I want to say that we've heard a lot of talk this morning about how this bill helps clarify the definition of sex. But the reality is that's not true. This bill has a different definition of sex than already exists in Missouri statute. As a matter of fact, SB 76 is different than current bill SB 212 in its definition of sex and how it relies on determining someone's sex, which itself is different than SB 117, which is currently being heard, which also has a different definition of sex, which is also different than SB 632, which is different than SJR 57, which is different than, HB 624. My point there is saying that this is simple is not true. Your own body has its own varied definitions of sexes, which are self-contradictory. I have clients who would be a man in one and a woman in the other. And so that alone needs to be revisited. I would hope that you would deliberate more on what your definition is. It also is very different than President.
You've exceeded your time limit. Can you wrap up your
Yes, ma'am.
comments? Thank you.
It's also very different than President Trump's definition of sex, which he has just put out in an executive order. And because we have that huge divergence between the federal definition, we're going to see very big differences in how these cases are handled.
Thank you for your time.
And one last thing, I have a report on this issue that I'm going to make available to your committee members as well
Thank
on
you.
all of our research.
If you want to leave it on the desk with your witness form, we'll make sure that's distributed, or?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? See none, thank you. Next, to testify in opposition.
Yes, members of the committee, Madam Chair, my name is Dr. Susan Shelby, and I'm here to testify on behalf of my beautiful and talented daughter, Lavora Shelby, who is a transgender, who identifies as a transgender person. My career has been involved in medical research for the last 30 years, doing clinical trials, randomized clinical trials, and before that, identifying new medicines and spending 10 years in academic research at places like the Scripps Research Institute and the Salk Institute for Biological Trials. I'd like to let you know that I've heard many inaccuracies today, and I'd like to set the record straight. I'm not on any train, and I'm not listening to the train conductor. I trust the medical literature. That's what my training, education, and experience has taught me to do. The medical and scientific literature. And before I went to the Emerging Issues Committee last year and provided evidence about the roughly 2% of the population, that's a prevalence of 2% of the population.
Are you testifying, excuse me, are you testifying in opposition to Senate Bill 76?
Yes.
Okay, can you keep your comments succinct to that issue?
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks, I will. But I would like to address this because I hear a great misunderstanding. We are not a binary species. 2%, fully 2% of the human Homo sapiens species falls into a category of intersex, Klinefelters, Turner syndrome, 5-alpha reductase deficiency, and actually identifying as transgender. So it is completely unfair and wrong to say you are male or you are female.
Thank you.
And that you fit into those two categories. That is just simply an infactual medical basis.
You've exceeded your time limit, so we're going to go to questions. Do you have questions for the witness? Senator Moon?
Thank you for your testimony. You mentioned the intersex and some of the other anomalies. What is the percentage in our population that would make up those groups?
2%.
2%. Okay.
Prevalence,
Okay.
sir.
As I've listened to the testimony of those coming up, particularly on this bill, my mind goes back to some of the pastures that I oversee.
Some of the pastures?
Yes, ma'am.
Pastures of grass?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I've often wondered how rich I could be if I could develop an animal that could be a male one day and a female the other, but it's impossible.
Yes, it's called 5-alpha reductase
so
deficiency.
what I'm trying to say to you, ma'am, is that to a logically thinking...
It's doctor, sir.
Doctor, ma'am. To a logically thinking person, there are two sexes. There are male and female.
And that's incorrect.
Well, I beg to differ.
There are two.
I think we
there
can
are two.
think,
there are
ma'am,
children that are born
think we can,
apparently female.
I think
Can you
we
let
can
it? You need
think
to let him
that
finish
we
his
are
comments, and then you'll have a
something that
turn.
we're not, but there are, and for the purposes of this bill, I think there is male and female.
Do we-
And if you
Let
look
him
all
finish.
across, if you look all across the different species of animals in particular, there are only one or the other.
2%.
And there are
Let him
2%
finish.
across
Let him,
species.
Ma'am,
So And
Doctor?
I'll just end it because I'm not
Thank
going to
you.
get
Let
anywhere,
him
but thank you
finish.
very much. Doctor, thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, and if I can just go on to provide you with an example, Mr. Moon, if you
It's
look
Senator.
to the Senator Moon, if you look to the species of humans, if you look to other primate species, you'll find alpha-5 reductase deficiency, and that involves children who are apparently little girls who are born. They're well known in the Dominican Republic, actually, in a tribe that's well studied there, but they exist everywhere, actually. And those girls reach puberty and then grow a penis and grow testes and become boys. Now, do they have trouble there in the Dominican Republic with this? No. They are just known as the girls who become boys. We don't try to say you can't go to this bathroom. We don't try to discriminate and say you can't be hired at this job. They are just the girls, it's accepted. Those are just the girls that become boys. And I think the more that we, as adults who are sentient and attended college, can just accept that medical research shows for decades now that we are not a binary species, the better off we'll be.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, in opposition. This will be the last one. Due to time. That was a question, so.
Hello, my name is Samantha Jones, and I'm a voter, a taxpayer, a Missourian, a public servant, and a state of Missouri employee. I'm also bisexual, and I am gender nonconforming. This particular bill, Senate Bill 76, causes my community and myself great distress. The language defining sex as only male or female on anatomical reproductive organs and chromosomal makeup is exclusionary, even though the bill seems to want to prevent discrimination and exclusion on the basis of sex. This definition permits discrimination of individuals who do not fall into these definitions, such as intersex individuals, and individuals whose reproductive organs may be different. Humans have a much wider range of anatomy and chromosomal makeup, as shown through biological scientific community, including XXY, XXX, and people with considered female genitalia and reproductive organs that can have an XY makeup because they didn't receive hormones that make the fetus change the organs to male in utero. There is ambiguous genitalia for all chromosome types, resulting in a sex assigned at birth that may not match the chromosomal makeup of the person in question. And these individuals deserve to be recognized and not be discriminated against as well. I am such a person. My uterus is too small, and I was able to access certain types of sterilization so that I do not die trying to have my reproductive organs work. The language of this bill suggests that I should be discriminated against and based on the definitions of sex and reproductive organs. This also suggests that every individual knows their genetic makeup, which is not generally done and is expensive to obtain. This bill suggests that individuals such as myself must disclose our private medical information to be on the receiving end of discrimination. More than anything, I want to live a life free of discrimination where I can live privately without my physical existence being legislated about on a regular basis. I've heard the senators of this committee speak about justice and freedom. If we do not allow for people to live with privacy and receive equality regardless of sex, we are infringing on their lives and doing them a disservice. Voting yes on this bill would allow for discrimination based on a rudimentary understanding of biology and ignore experts in the field and deny individuals privacy and autonomy.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness?
Thank you for being here. You know, as I continue to learn a lot more about this subject, and I thank you again for sharing your story. As we consider legislation the other day, I just want to iterate how important this hearing process is and whether you were able to come and testify or not. One of my colleagues the other day referred to a hearing as simply an airing of grievances. And as you all shared your stories and your powerful testimony and truly your expertise in this area, whether you were an attorney or a doctor or just somebody impacted by this legislation, I thank you for sharing those grievances with us and again having that understanding of how these laws will impact your very existence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Leave your witness form there on the table. Senator Schnelting, do you have any closing comments? All right. Thank you. With that, we adjourn health, families, and seniors. Thank you.